Welcome back to another episode of Chasing the Farm Life. Recently, you may have seen our video where we made a wine. It's a very thorough video, and maybe got some feedback that it was a bit long. So if you're making wine or anything for the very first time, I suggest you go watch that video. Today we're going to make a mead. I'm going to try and whip through it and assume you kind of have the basics, but I will explain as I'm going along. Today I'm making root beer mead. This is a favorite of pretty much everyone that's ever tried it, has enjoyed it. I strongly suggest as an entry level kind of silly hooch alcohol to make, going with root beer or Dr. Pepper. They actually taste almost the same. We're going to be using pure and simple honey. The reasoning for that is it is one of the cheaper honeys at the grocery store. There is a lot of reasons and benefits to using a good honey. However, if we're simply just making alcohol, I'm not going to spend the money on it. As you can also notice, my generic root beer. So, we've sanitized everything in our Star San to get everything nice and clean, and we have our container here. These large honeys that you get from Walmart, Costco, most of them are 5 pounds. So, what constitutes a mead is over 50% of the alcohol being from honey. So we're going to go ahead and dump more honey than you would think in here. Probably around 2 pounds. Nice and simple. And we're going to go with some of our root beer. This is a much easier process than making wine and much less labor intensive. The worst part about this is stirring the honey. So if you've watched our video or you've seen other videos, you know that the process that we're going to be going through here is adding yeast to this container that is going to make the honey and the sugar that is currently in the pop into alcohol. When this is complete, this is going to have a very dry taste. If you're not familiar with what I mean by dry, I would almost describe it as bland. It's probably similar to if you've ever had food and you thought, well, this is just terrible, and you put a little salt on it, all those flavors come out. That's what's going to happen if you add sweetness to this at the end. So the end product, when this is done fermenting, will probably not be your favorite. But what we're going to do is we're going to back sweeten it, which is to add a little sweetness, and I'll show you in a later video how to do that. And one of the easiest ways is just to add more root beer. What you do have to be cautious of when back sweetening is that sugar that you're adding to it will ferment, and it can cause your bottles to explode. We use these type of bottles when making something like this. I always just think they're more fun. It's nice to be able to hand one to someone, and it's just, for a drink like this, I prefer it to a wine bottle, and these can be pressurized. I'm going to go ahead and add this second one in. Actually, I'm going to stir before we get too full, because this stirring process is a nuisance. You'll notice this is carbonated now because of the root beer. By the time this is done fermenting, it won't really be carbonated from the original bottles. However, there will be CO2 within the liquid that has been a byproduct of the yeast fermentation. That actually seems to have mixed up a lot easier than normal. We have tried this with virtually every pot known to man. Dr. Pepper and root beer are definitely the best. Most of any of the clear liquids like Mountain Dew, Sprite, 7-Up, they leave a lot to be desired, you could say. They can be good. They usually involve modifying them at the end to try and make them arguably good, but this will just be good. So this is my hydrometer. If you're not familiar how they work, you can watch my other video, but this is going to tell us what our starting specific gravity is. You can put it in a container like this and drop it in here, which is great, especially when making wine, because you actually are going to have fruit particles and stuff in here, sometimes a bag. But in this case, we just have a full container, and if our sugar content is high enough, this should flow, which it does. So we probably put a little more honey in there than I was anticipating. We're sitting just past 1.10, which is going to make us, if it ferments all the way up, like 13% alcohol, maybe 14. That is higher than I would like for a drink like this. Like I said, we're going to individually package them. But the nice thing is I'm going to make it a little bit on the stronger side, and then I'm going to dilute with my regular root beer at the back end, or at the end, to back sweeten. That's going to give me more volume, which is going to allow me to have more containers. And you can't really go wrong with that. So I don't think I'll be adding any more sugar. Other than this here, just to top it off. I would be cautious to leave a little space at the top, because as this ferments tonight, it is going to bubble. One thing that I don't have on the table here, but you can see in other videos, is yeast nutrient. Yeast nutrient provides the yeast with nutrition so that they can begin to multiply and make your drink function properly. They are useful in wines, but they are absolutely necessary in drinks like this. They just don't have what the yeast needs when we're talking about just root beer and honey. That doesn't mean that if you put the yeast in there that it won't work, but I would strongly suggest yeast nutrient. So here I have my yeast that's been sitting in warm water for 20 minutes, which I'm going to add, trying to have it not all be settled out at the bottom. I don't know how many times I've done that and not thought about it. So be cautious when you're making something with carbonation. I'm going to put my lid on. And I will go back and add the yeast nutrient afterwards. And there you have it. I'm going to come back. I'm going to set this somewhere where it's not going to overflow for tonight. And then I'm going to come back after that every 2 weeks and check the specific gravity. And each time it's going to be lower and lower and lower until it's going to get to like 0.996. And then I'm going to check it again in 2 weeks and it's going to be 0.996 again. And you could stop there. I usually might give it a few more days and check it again, just to make sure you don't have a stalled fermentation and it starts fermenting again. And that number might seem intimidating to you, like what's a 0.996 or what's a 1.110? The actual number doesn't matter as much, it's just the change between the two. Although this helps figure out your actual alcohol content, its main use is just to figure out when your wine stops fermenting, or in this case, mead. So I am going to get a rag and clean up this mess that I've made. I hope this video was a little bit more tolerable and quick and easy for you. If you like videos like this, please like and subscribe.